a hopeful word, an all too familiar word that we need to get right, and a commissioning word. Those are the three words that are on my mind tonight as we were praying for peace, not just in Eastern Europe, but in the world, United States, our community, Willow Grove, and most especially within all of us. So first, a hopeful word. I don't know about you, but I have been looking for something extremely uplifting lately. Again, especially with the war going on, with people dying, with 4 million people being moved from their country. I've been looking for a hopeful word as COVID in other countries are on the rise again. I've been looking for a hopeful word as just quite frankly, we as human beings, to put it bluntly, can just be jerks to one another sometimes. As I will raise my hand and be the first one to say that. So something hopeful. So as I was thinking of something hopeful, the first thing that came to my mind was actually the back of the Bible, to the book of Revelations. Something that I use during funeral masses, which is really the beginning of everything. Where the book of Revelation chapter 22 says this: "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth has passed away, and the sea is no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down from the heaven from God, prepared the bride from her husband. And I heard a great voice coming from the throne. Behold, the dwelling of God is with men. He will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. And God himself will be with them. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning or crying, no more pain any more. For the former things have passed away. And he who sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. Also he said, Write this, for these words are trustworthy and true. And he said to me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. This, my brothers and sisters, is a promise. And the maker of this promise is not a man nor a priest. He is not a politician. He is not some kind of spin doctor. He is not a bishop. He is not a pope. Our Heavenly Father makes this promise to his creatures. And our Heavenly Father is not a liar. His promises of new heaven and new earth, he promises that he will wipe away every single tear from our eyes. He promises that there's going to be no more death, no more evil, no more sickness, no more cancer. But please make note this. It does not happen by our cleverness. It does not happen by our own strength. And it most especially does not happen by our can-do spirit. As intelligent and sophisticated and wise we pretend to be, here is the simple truth. You and I are utterly powerless to fix ourselves and what is really wrong in this world and with the human race. Because what God says again, if you listen, he is telling us he is the only one who can make all things new, which is going to lead to the familiar word that we all need to get right. The familiar word that Jesus asks us over and over again in his question. The question he had in today's gospel. And he just doesn't ask his disciples just in that book. He is asking you and me right now from the monstrance. Right now. And right now, he's actually trying to provoke our minds and hearts. He is trying to bring us to the point of a crisis. He is trying to look at our very beings and confront them. Who do you say that I am? Who do you say that I am, especially with all that is going on in this world right now? All that is going on in his church right now. All that is going on in your life and in mine. Who do you say that I am? We hear Peter say, you are the Christ. But here's the problem. We all know this passage. We can all say it and articulate it right away. It is very, very familiar for most of us. But what does it mean to once again say, you are the Christ? You are the Messiah. You are the Anointed One. What does that actually mean to our hearts? We know it means that Jesus is the true King of heaven and earth. We know that it means that he's the rightful ruler of every single thing of creation. Before time and after time. Amongst the Jewish people, before Jesus, there becomes this great anticipation. This great anticipation and expectation for someone to come, of this mysterious figure who is going to become that sent from the Father, who is going to put creation back together again. He is going to rescue us from the enemy. So this begs the question in all of our minds and hearts. Rescue us from whom? Rescue us from what? At the time of the Jewish people, they saw the great Roman Empire as the enemy. At the time of Jesus, they saw the great figure of Caesar as the enemy. The Roman Empire, directed by Caesar, invaded their homeland. But Rome was not their enemy. Caesar was not their enemy. So who was their real enemy again? This is an incredibly important question for you and me, especially right now. Who is our real enemy? Who do we think it is? Do we think the enemy is a country? Do we think the enemy is a leader of a country? Do we think our enemy is a personal grudge that we have against someone? Because I don't think most Christians get this right. I don't think most of us understand the bad news either. Really understand the bad news. That if we don't understand the bad news, we will never understand the unbelievably great news of Jesus on the cross. And I would say even further, again, I will raise my hand first and say this. We as Americans are very naive in this. We have constructed this ridiculous narrative that this world is by and large safe in a binary place, where in the fact that this world is so much different. It is a battlefield. and it is held hostage not by some political force or a country. It is held hostage by a malicious enemy, the likes of which that will blow us away and our worst nightmares. And despite all of our intelligence in America and our can-do spirit, you and I are utterly powerless against this enemy. So you might say to me, okay, what is the proof of that? You might just be exaggerating right now. Well, I can tell you, every funeral mass we've had this past year, over 50 of them, can tell you the fact, the very clear results of what sin is earthly death. And throughout Jesus' ministry, he continues to identify and fight this adversary, this accuser, this liar, the enemy, your enemy and mine. And he does it again in today's reading, where he tells Peter he is acting like his enemy, his accuser. After he tells his disciples that he's going to have to suffer and die for the cross, Peter can't handle the cross. He can't handle it. Maybe because he knows what's coming for himself, and he knows very well that Jesus has asked him to pick up his cross, not to follow his own will, but to follow him. As Peter takes Jesus inside and says, "God forbid, Lord." And then Jesus quickly rebukes him and says, "Get behind me, Satan." That is the enemy. The enemy is Satan. And his children, the enemy's children of Satan, are sin and death. And Jesus, the Messiah, true King, the anointed one, rightful ruler that all that is, came to earth not to give us gift baskets. He came to earth to go to war. To go to war that you and I cannot compete against without him. That is what St. John writes in the first letter of John. The reason why the Son of Man appeared was to destroy the works of the devil. Jesus did not come to just tell neat stories. He did not come to be a nice guy or say things that we want to hear. Jesus came to fight a war. He came to deliver us, to invade a kingdom with a lowercase k, the kingdom of Satan. And it was conquered on Friday, that we will celebrate soon, that we call good. In the gospel, Jesus tells us today, in one of the gospels, Jesus says this: "How can one enter the strong man's house and plunder his goods, unless he first binds the strong man? That indeed he plunders the house. The strong man is Satan. The house is the world. The goods are us. And the one who binds the strong man is Jesus." Isaiah says this about the adversary. "Let the adversary draw near to me. Let him come close to me." So why does Isaiah say this? Why does Jesus act like this on the cross? Why does he draw the adversary close to him? I like how John Ricardo explains it. He says when Jesus dies on the cross, he is not simply hanging passively on the cross. He is actually attacking Satan. He is an ambush predator. Ambush predators are sit-and-wait predators that capture or trap their prey by stealth, luring or utilizing an element of surprise. So once the prey is close, the predator launches a surprise attack. That is what Jesus is doing on the cross. it would never have dawned on Satan that God would become a creature to save his creature. Satan, in his pride, in his lying, and his arrogance, would never believe that God would lower himself to be a man, humble himself to do this. It is not even fathomable to him. That is how Jesus tricks the enemy. And though through the cross, once and for all, defeated sin and death. And you know what? It was never a contest. So with all that being said, and with all of us knowing what is staring in us our face right now, what's going on in the world, or maybe in our lives personally, we all know that things are not clearly how they should be. So why not? Because you and I live in this in-between time, the already not yet time. Jesus has risen from the dead. He has ascended into heaven, but he has not returned to glory. And we know that we are living in a not yet time, as we heard that what we want to live in the Revelation time. One day we will. Those who surrender their wills to the Father, everything we will get as promised. So what are we supposed to do in the meantime? This leads me to the commissioning word. I've always been fascinated by Winston Churchill. I've always been fascinated by his courage and heroism. In the midst of some dark and evil times during World War II, real leadership and real heroism is extremely rare, especially in times of crisis. That is why we follow them. The way we do that when we see them. And Churchill was simply an amazing, heroic man in a very horrible, awful, terrible time. And I shudder to think what it would have been like without his leadership. So in a speech that Churchill gave in 1941, he said something that I find that is very, very, very hopeful even for us today. So to think about this before I give you the speech, it's England 1941. They are enduring horrible bombings in their country. It is the early part of the war, and things look rather bleak for them. And this is what Churchill says. These are not dark times. They are great days. The greatest day our country has ever lived. And we must all thank God that we have been allowed, each of us according to our own stations, to play a part in making these days memorable in the history of our human race. Maybe these days are not dark days for us either. Maybe they are great days of opportunity. Churchill didn't happen to live in that time. He was created by God and given gifts and talents by God to use them for that time. And you and I don't happen to live in this time right now. You and I were created by God to live in this particular time, in this particular church, for a reason. In this place and in this mess right now. And he has given every single one of us, do not be mistaken, every single one of us a mission. As disciples of Jesus. And that mission is not to point to ourselves. That mission is not to do our own wills and get what we want when we want it. Our mission is quite simply, is to tell others about the crucified and risen one, the Messiah, the anointed one, the only king that matters, the Lord of Lords, the one who bound the strong man. Hope for a dying race. So brothers and sisters, our only hope is Jesus. So once again, I'm praying that we really take these things seriously, that we fall in love with Jesus and we stay in love with Jesus, because that will make all the difference in our world.